He came into her life when she had given up on happiness, but he carried a secret that would change everything. Before his time ran out, he made one last wish for her heart. Will she discover the love he left behind? Stay tuned because you are about to watch a beautiful story and find out what happened next. Hello family, welcome to Tales Haven. Kindly subscribe to my channel for more interesting stories. Thank you as you do so. Sit back, relax as we dive into the story. The late afternoon sun painted the houses on Maple Street with a warm, golden light. It was the kind of day when people watered their lawns or sat on their porches drinking iced tea. But Emily Carter sat alone by her window, staring out with tired eyes. She was 29, with a soft, kind face that often looked sad. She worked at Oak Ridge Public Library, where she spent most of her time shelving books and helping visitors. Her life had been quiet and lonely for the past 3 years, ever since her parents were killed in a car accident on a rainy night. After that, everything seemed to lose color. She watched as a big white moving truck pulled up in front of the little blue house next door. That house had been empty since old Mr. Howard passed away. Now, 2 men in work uniforms began unloading boxes and carrying them inside. Emily tried not to care, but she found herself curious. A few minutes later, she saw him. A tall man with dark hair stepped out of the truck. He wore jeans and a gray t-shirt, and he carried a small potted plant in one hand. Even from her window, Emily could see something different about him. He looked tired, his shoulders slightly slouched, but his eyes were bright, almost playful. He turned and looked right at her window. For a moment, Emily felt embarrassed and ducked behind the curtain. Her heart beat faster, though she didn't know why. She hadn't felt anything like this in a long time. That evening, Emily tried to distract herself by making dinner. She heated a bowl of soup and sat alone at her small kitchen table. But she couldn't stop thinking about the man next door. Who was he? Why did he look so calm, like he had already made peace with something? Just as she was finishing her soup, there was a knock on the door. Emily froze. She wasn't used to visitors. She wiped her hands on a dish towel and slowly walked to the door. When she opened it, the man from the moving truck stood there, smiling. "Hi," he said in a warm, friendly voice. "I'm Jacob Walker. I just moved in next door." "Oh," Emily said, feeling her cheeks turn pink. "Hi, I'm Emily." Jacob glanced past her into the dim hallway behind her. "I hope I'm not bothering you. I just wanted to say hello and introduce myself." "You're not bothering me," she said softly. Jacob held up the little potted plant. "I thought maybe you'd like this. A housewarming gift, or I guess a neighbor-warming gift." Emily looked at the plant. It was a bright yellow daisy in a clay pot. For some reason, she felt tears gather in her eyes. No one had given her a flower in years. "Thank you," she whispered, taking it carefully. Jacob shifted his weight and looked around as if checking to see if anyone was watching. Then he leaned closer and lowered his voice. "I have to ask, why do you always keep your curtains closed? From the street, it looks like a haunted house. I almost turned around and called a ghost hunter." Emily blinked in surprise. Then, before she could stop herself, she let out a small laugh. It sounded strange in her own ears, like a sound she'd forgotten how to make. Jacob grinned. "There it is. I knew you could laugh." For the first time in so long, Emily felt a tiny spark inside her chest, something warm and hopeful. "Welcome to Maple Street," she said, smiling shyly. "Thanks," Jacob replied. "I think I'm going to like it here." That night, Emily set the daisy on her kitchen table. She kept glancing at it, feeling that somehow everything was about to change. And she was right. The next morning, Emily woke up feeling different. Usually, she would drag herself out of bed, her heart heavy with sadness. But when she walked into the kitchen and saw the little yellow daisy on the table, she felt something like lightness. She made her coffee and looked out the window. Jacob was already outside, carrying boxes into his new home. He waved when he saw her. She felt shy again but lifted her hand to wave back. On her way to work, Emily kept thinking about how Jacob had teased her about the curtains. No one had spoken to her like that in years, kind but honest, like he wanted to wake her up from a long sleep. At the library, her coworker Ben noticed her soft smile. Ben was tall with sandy blonde hair and kind green eyes. He had been working with her for 2 years and often worried about her. "You look happy," Ben said as he restocked the shelves. Emily blushed. "I guess I'm just having a good morning." Ben tilted his head, studying her. "Well, whatever it is, keep it up." By the time she walked home that evening, the sky had turned pink and gold. She saw Jacob sitting on the front porch, strumming an old guitar. His voice was low and warm, and Emily slowed her steps to listen. He looked up and called, "Hey, Emily, come over here." Part of her wanted to run inside and hide, but instead, she walked up his porch steps. Jacob set the guitar aside and leaned back in his chair. "Long day." She nodded. "Sometimes the library feels like it never ends." "You know what you need?" Jacob asked with a playful grin. "Muffins." "Muffins," she echoed. "Fresh muffins," he insisted. "Come inside. I bought too many, and if you don't help me eat them, I'll have to roll myself back out here tomorrow." Emily laughed, surprising herself again. Inside, Jacob's house was still half in boxes, but it felt warm. He had a lamp glowing on a side table and a few photos propped up on the counter. Pictures of him standing by a mountain, smiling in the snow. "I love your photos," Emily said softly. "Thanks," Jacob replied, opening a white bakery box. "I traveled a lot before I moved here." He didn't explain why he stopped traveling, and she didn't ask. They sat at the small kitchen table, eating blueberry muffins. Emily noticed how he closed his eyes when he took a bite, like he was really tasting every crumb. "I used to make these with my mom," he said after a moment. "She always said food tasted better when you shared it." Emily felt a pang in her heart. She thought of her own mother's recipes, now hidden in old cookbooks she hadn't touched since the accident. "You were right about my curtains," she said, trying to change the subject. "I guess I didn't realize how dark my house looked." Jacob's eyes were gentle. Sometimes, when life hurts too much, it feels safer to close everything off. But you deserve more than that. Emily looked down at her plate, her throat tight. No one had ever said that to her, not even Ben, though he cared in his own quiet way. Jacob quickly smiled and nudged the bakery box toward her. "Here, take some home. And, maybe tomorrow, open the windows." "I'll try," she whispered. As she walked back to her house, Emily held the box of muffins like it was something precious. Inside, she turned on a lamp she hadn't used in years and pulled the curtains back just a little. She peeked outside. Jacob was already looking her way, guitar in hand. And when he started to play again, she knew she wasn't invisible anymore. But Jacob still kept his secret close to his heart. Late that night, when the street was quiet, he sat alone in his living room, reading the folder of medical papers. The words blurred, but the truth remained. Stage 4 cancer. He closed the folder and looked at the lamp glowing in Emily's window. For a moment, he let himself smile. He didn't know how much time he had, but he knew one thing for sure: he was going to spend it making her happy. The next morning, Emily woke up before sunrise. She stood by the window, watching the sky slowly turn blue and gold. She thought about Jacob sitting in his living room the night before, alone with his papers. She didn't know what they said, but she could tell he was carrying something heavy. She opened the curtains all the way. For the first time in years, light poured into her living room. It felt like breathing fresh air after being shut in a dark room for too long. A little later, as she left for work, Jacob stepped onto his porch with a steaming mug of coffee. He looked at her windows and smiled. "Look at that," he called. "It's not haunted anymore." Emily laughed, hugging her purse to her chest. "I guess you were right." "I'm always right," Jacob teased. "Don't forget it." When she walked past his house, he reached out and tapped her arm gently. "Have a good day, Emily." "You too," she said, and she felt warm all the way to the library. At work, Ben noticed right away that she was different. "You're glowing," he said, setting a stack of books on the counter. Emily felt shy, but happy. "I'm just trying to let more light in." Ben nodded slowly, his eyes searching her face. "I'm glad," he said. You deserve it. They worked side by side, all morning. Once in a while, Ben would glance at her, as if he wanted to say something more. But every time, he looked away and stayed silent. When Emily got home that evening, she found a folded note on her front porch. She picked it up and read, "Dinner at my place? I promise not to burn anything.
Jay.
She smiled and knocked on his door a little later. Jacob was standing in the kitchen, wearing an apron that said, "Kiss the cook." She giggled when she read it. "I won't be kissing any cooks tonight," she said playfully. Jacob put a hand over his heart and pretended to look offended. "You wound me, Miss Carter." They ate spaghetti with garlic bread. Jacob told her stories about the places he'd traveled: New York, Arizona, Alaska. His eyes lit up when he spoke, and Emily couldn't look away. "Why did you stop traveling?" she finally asked, her voice gentle. Jacob's smile faded just a little. He looked down at his plate. "I guess I wanted to slow down and be somewhere that felt peaceful." Emily felt her heart ache for him, though she didn't know why. After dinner, Jacob spotted the old guitar propped in the corner of her living room. "Is that yours?" he asked, pointing. Emily nodded. "It was my dad's. I haven't touched it in years." Jacob walked over and picked it up. He strummed the strings softly, then looked at her with a mischievous smile. "Mind if I play?" She shook her head. He sat on the couch and started to sing a silly little song about Emily's house. Musical note. She lived in a haunted cottage, with curtains closed so tight, till a handsome man moved in next door and brought her into the light. Musical note. Emily pressed her hand to her mouth, trying not to burst out laughing. "Jacob, stop," she cried, tears of laughter filling her eyes. "No way," he said, grinning. "I've been working on the sequel." The day Emily smiled, her laughter finally broke free, warm and real. Later, as he set the guitar down, Jacob looked at her seriously. "Emily, you have a beautiful laugh," he said. Her cheeks flushed pink. "Thank you." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air felt heavy and sweet at the same time. Then Jacob cleared his throat. "I should go home before you kick me out." She walked him to the door, her heart beating too fast. "Good night," she whispered. "Good night, Emily," he replied. His eyes looked sad for just a second before he turned and walked across the porch to his house. When she closed the door, she touched her cheek where it was still warm from smiling. And in his own kitchen, Jacob leaned against the counter, feeling the ache in his side grow sharper. But he didn't regret it. If he only had a little time left, he was going to spend it helping her remember how to feel alive again. The next morning, Emily woke up feeling lighter than she had in years. She walked into her bright living room, still thinking about Jacob's silly song. Her heart beat faster when she remembered the way he had looked at her before he left, like she mattered. But later that day, as she sat behind the library desk checking in books, she couldn't stop wondering about the sadness she'd seen in Jacob's eyes. It was like he was carrying something too heavy to share. She was so lost in thought that she jumped when Ben set a cup of coffee in front of her. "Earth to Emily," he teased gently. "Where did you go just now?" Emily smiled, though her cheeks were warm. "I was just thinking." "About your new neighbor?" Ben asked. He tried to sound casual, but his voice was quiet. Emily didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to tell Ben everything, how Jacob made her laugh and feel alive again. But she also felt something twist in her chest, like she was betraying a friend by even thinking about it. Ben cleared his throat. "I've seen him around. He seems nice." "He is," Emily said softly. "He's different." Ben nodded and looked down at his shoes. For a moment, Emily wondered if she'd hurt his feelings, but before she could ask, a group of children ran in for story hour, and Ben went to help them. That evening, Emily was putting her keys in her purse outside the library when she heard someone calling her name. "Emily." She turned and saw Jacob walking across the parking lot, holding a small paper bag. He was out of breath when he reached her. "I was hoping to catch you before you left," he said, smiling. "Is everything okay?" she asked, worried. He held out the bag. "I brought you something." Inside was a chocolate cupcake with rainbow sprinkles. "I saw them in the bakery and thought they looked too cheerful not to share," he explained. Emily laughed and shook her head. You can't keep feeding me like this. I'll turn into a cupcake. That's fine, Jacob said. You'd be the prettiest cupcake on Maple Street. Emily rolled her eyes, but felt her heart flutter. They walked toward her car together. For a few seconds, everything felt normal and easy, as if they'd been friends forever. But when Jacob paused to catch his breath, Emily noticed the strain on his face. Are you feeling okay? She asked carefully. Jacob nodded quickly. Just a little tired. Long day. He was always so quick to brush things away. As she drove home, Emily thought about Ben again. She remembered all the times he had stayed late to help her close the library. The times he brought her tea when she had a headache. How he always listened, even when she had nothing to say. Ben had never asked for anything in return. She wondered if maybe he felt something more than friendship, but she had been too lost in her sadness to see it. That night, Jacob sat on his porch with his guitar resting against his knee. When he saw Emily pull into her driveway, he stood and walked toward her. Thanks for the cupcake, she called before he could speak. You're welcome, he said, his voice softer than usual. Emily, if I ask you something, would you promise not to laugh? Of course, she said, her heart beating faster. He looked down, like he was searching for the right words. If you could have anything at all, what would it be? Emily thought for a long moment. Finally, she whispered, I'd want to feel loved again. I'd want to feel like I belong somewhere. Jacob nodded, and for a moment, his eyes looked bright with unshed tears. You deserve that, he said. You deserve all of it. When Emily went inside, she felt overwhelmed. Jacob was so kind, so full of life and secrets she didn't understand. And Ben was steady and patient, waiting in the background. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she felt something opening in her heart, a tiny, brave hope that maybe, just maybe, she could find love again. Across the street, Jacob watched her light turn on. He sat back down, clutching his side as pain shot through him. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Time was running out and he knew it. But before he left this world, he was going to make sure Emily's heart would never be lonely again. The next morning, Jacob woke early. He sat on the edge of his bed, feeling the pain spreading through his chest and sighed like fire. He pressed a hand there, breathing slowly. Not yet, he thought. Just a little more time. He stood up and walked to his kitchen table. On it sat 2 envelopes he had prepared the night before. One with Emily's name written in careful letters, the other with Ben's. Jacob picked them up and held them to his heart. He closed his eyes, thinking of Emily's laugh and the way her eyes had finally started to shine again. He wanted to see her one last time. Later that afternoon, Emily was shelving books at the library when her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and read the message. Can you come over tonight? I'd like to see you. Her heart skipped a beat. She typed back quickly. Of course. Is everything okay? Jacob didn't answer right away. Finally, 3 little dots appeared. Just need to talk. 7 p.m.? I'll be there, she replied. When she walked up Jacob's porch that evening, she felt her hands shaking. She knocked softly. Come in, his voice called, sounding weaker than usual. Emily stepped inside and felt her chest tighten. Jacob was sitting in his favorite chair by the window, looking pale and tired. The guitar rested on the floor beside him, like he didn't have the strength to pick it up. Jacob, she whispered, moving closer. What's wrong? He tried to smile but couldn't quite manage it. I didn't want you to see me like this, he said, voice rough. She knelt beside the chair, taking his hand. You don't have to pretend with me. For a moment, he closed his eyes, as if gathering courage. Then he opened them and looked right into hers. I'm sick, Emily, he said softly. I've been sick for a long time. I didn't tell you, because I didn't want to be just another sadness in your life. Tears filled her eyes. Why didn't you let me help you? Because you were finally starting to live again, Jacob whispered. And that was enough for me. She shook her head, crying. You made me believe in happiness again. You can't just leave. He lifted a trembling hand and touched her cheek. I'm not leaving you alone. He reached to the side table and picked up the envelope with her name. Read this when I'm gone, he said. Please. Emily clutched it to her chest, unable to speak. Jacob smiled weakly. And there's one more thing. He handed her the second envelope. This is for Ben. Her eyes widened in confusion. Ben? Why? Because he loves you, Jacob whispered. He has loved you all along. He's the kind of man who will stay. I've seen the way he looks at you. Emily covered her mouth, tears falling onto her hands. I'm sorry, Jacob said, his voice breaking. I didn't mean to make you love me, but I had to help you find your way back to the world, and to someone who can love you for all the years I won't have. She sobbed, leaning her head on his knee. Jacob laid his hand on her hair, holding her gently. They stayed like that a long time as the sun slipped away outside the window. 2 days later, Emily stood in Jacob's quiet house. Everything was still. She held his letter in shaking hands and opened it. Dear Emily, I came here because I didn't have much time left. I thought I would die alone, and maybe I deserved that. But then I met you. You taught me that life is still beautiful, even when it hurts. You made me laugh again. You made me feel like a man, not just a patient waiting for the end. I hope, more than anything, you will open your heart to love. Not because I told you to, but because you are meant for it. Ben loves you. He has always loved you. He is steady and kind, the way I wish I could have been if I had more time. Please let yourself be happy. Thank you for everything. With all my heart, Jacob. Emily pressed the letter to her chest, sobbing. She had never known someone so brave, so selfless. The next day, she walked into the library. Her eyes were swollen from crying. Ben looked up from the front desk, worry etched into every line of his face. Emily, he asked softly. Without thinking, she walked to him and pressed the second envelope into his hands. He wanted you to have this, she whispered. Ben opened it, and his hands trembled as he read.
Take care of her for me.
When he looked up, his eyes were wet with tears. I will, he whispered. I promise. It took time for Emily's heart to heal, but as the weeks passed, she found herself leaning on Ben more. They took walks after work and talked about Jacob, about the days that felt too quiet without him. One evening, as they sat on her porch under the stars, Ben reached for her hand. You don't have to rush, he said gently. I'll wait as long as you need. Emily looked up at the sky and thought of Jacob, somewhere beyond her sight, but still close in spirit. And for the first time, she felt like she wasn't alone anymore. 1 year later, Maple Street looked almost the same. The little blue house was still there, with the flowers Jacob had planted blooming bright against the porch. Emily stood on her own front steps, the evening sun painting her hair gold. She felt the warm breeze on her face and closed her eyes. She thought of Jacob every day, how he had arrived in her life like a sunrise after a long night. She missed him, but the pain had softened into something gentle, something she could carry without breaking. She looked down the walk and saw Ben coming up the path, holding 2 cups of iced tea. He wore that shy, patient smile that always made her heart steady. Iced tea delivery, he called. You're too good to me, Emily teased, taking a cup. They sat side by side on the porch steps, sipping their drinks as the sky turned pink. After a quiet moment, Ben set his cup down and took her hand in both of his. You know, he said, I used to wonder if you'd ever look at me the way you looked at him. Emily turned to face him, her eyes soft. I didn't think my heart could open again. But you were always there, waiting for me to be ready. Ben brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. I would have waited forever. Emily felt her throat tighten, but this time, it wasn't from sadness. It was gratitude, and something new, something bright and steady. She leaned in and kissed him, slow and sweet. When they pulled back, Ben rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he whispered. I love you too, Emily said, and she meant it with her whole heart. Above them, the first stars began to appear. And in that moment, Emily knew she was exactly where she was meant to be, finally home. That brings us to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you do, kindly subscribe to my channel, like, and share this video to your friends and loved ones. You can also comment what you feel about the story. Thanks for watching.